Hello, economics students. Today is going to be a really important day, this second day of the semester. We're going to be getting into a couple of concepts today that are really going to be key for much of what we are going to study this semester. And I thought I'd start off with this quote from an economist, a very famous economist by the name of John Maynard Keynes from the 20th century. And Keynes said that economics is a technique of thinking. Okay. Now, John Maynard Keynes, we're going to get into him quite a bit later this semester. I will say right now that you do not need to remember him at least right away, but you will see him in the future. And he is an economist that had a lot of impact in the 20th century and even today. But anyway, let's see what he's talking about when he said that economics is a technique of thinking. First of all, to understand this economic way of thinking, we have to understand two concepts. And those two concepts are scarcity and opportunity costs. So we're really going to be spending this class period or this lecture dealing with these two terms, scarcity and opportunity cost. You'll remember that scarcity was a part of the definition of economics, how we use our scarce resources to satisfy our needs and wants. So what are we talking about then when we talk about scarcity? Okay, well, scarcity can be defined mathematically, kind of, in this sort of an equation. Scarcity equals wants minus available resources. So what does that mean? Well, we have these wants or needs that we have, but we don't have the resources to satisfy all of our wants. And whatever wants cannot be satisfied because of the lack of resources to satisfy them, that is in fact the scarcity. Scarcity is the wants that we have minus the resources that we need to get our wants satisfied. Okay, so what makes something scarce? Well, without defining it right away, let's look at a few items and see if we can determine whether or not these items are scarce. And this might lead us to the answer of what makes something scarce. So first of all, is this scarce? Poison ivy. Is poison ivy scarce? Well, let's think about it. I can walk out into the football field right now and I'll bet you there is no poison ivy there, but that does not mean that poison ivy is scarce. Okay, just the fact that it is not in my immediate vicinity does not mean it is scarce. Would I want, for example, to walk through a field of poison ivy? Certainly not, because if I do that, at least if I'm walking through a field of poison ivy barefoot or in my shorts, more than likely I'm going to have within the next couple of hours a very nasty rash on my legs, which will probably extend to cover much of my body. No one wants to go touching poison ivy. It's not a good idea. If you've ever had poison ivy, you know that it is not a pleasant thing to have. So poison ivy is not something that we want, right? We do not want poison ivy. Now, there may be some scientific application for poison ivy. I don't know. But for the average human being, no one wants poison ivy. For that reason, I would say poison ivy is not scarce. It doesn't fulfill anyone's wants. Is water scarce? Well, we know that we all need water, but is it scarce? Well, gosh, if I want a bucket of water, I can get a bucket and I can go to the Rock River and I'll have water, right? Or I could drive up to Pierce Lake in Rock Cut State Park with a bucket and I can get water anytime I want it. So your basic water, like what you find in a river or a lake, that is not scarce. It's always there. Now, granted, we're not in a desert. Maybe in a desert, it might be a different story. But right here in the American Midwest, basic water is not scarce. However, what about clean drinking water? Is that scarce? There's a difference between the water in the Rock River, which I do not want to drink, and the water that I have in my house, which I do need to drink every now and then. Is clean drinking water scarce? Well, I would say that it is. And the reason it is scarce is because I cannot get clean drinking water just automatically. Now, you may be thinking, of course you can. All you got to do is turn on the faucet. But what happens every 3 months? I get a bill for my water. Okay? That water is not free. Your parents pay for that water. I pay for that water. I get a bill every 3 months for it, and I'm happy to pay that bill. And what happens if I do not pay that bill? Eventually, I will turn on the faucet and clean drinking water will not come out of that faucet anymore. So I am perfectly happy to pay the water bill every 3 months that arrives at my house. And so therefore I know that clean drinking water is in fact scarce because I'm willing to pay for it. I want it and I'm willing to pay for it. Therefore, clean drinking water is scarce. How about crude oil? In case you don't know, crude oil is the oil that is raw, that comes directly out of the ground. That is crude oil. You could put crude oil in your gas tank and it will ruin your car. It will not run a car. Crude oil in and of itself has basically no application. However, people will pay for crude oil, okay? ExxonMobil and all the other companies that you buy gasoline from, most of those companies will pay for crude oil. In fact, they're paying right now about $130 per barrel of crude oil. Crude oil is relatively expensive right now, $130 per barrel. And if crude oil were not scarce, then ExxonMobil and Chevron and British Petroleum and all these other companies would not be willing to pay $130 for a barrel of that oil. But the fact that they are willing to pay for it tells me that it is scarce. They're giving up their money to get the crude oil, and then they will turn that crude oil into something that we can use like gasoline or motor oil or various other applications. How about a pitcher, a baseball pitcher with an earned run average of 2.0? And by this, I'm talking about a professional baseball player. Would a professional baseball pitcher with an ERA of 2.0 be a scarce resource? Well, first of all, we have to understand that an ERA, earned run average of 2.0, is very, very good, okay? So, can a human being be a scarce resource? Would this baseball pitcher be a scarce resource? And I would say, yes, he would be a scarce resource. In fact, he's so scarce that there are owners of professional baseball teams right now who would be willing to pay him millions of dollars per year to play for their team. So if he were not scarce, then professional baseball teams would not be willing to pay that kind of money for him. The fact that they are willing to pay that kind of money tells me that a baseball player with that ERA is in fact a scarce resource. Remember, human beings can be scarce resources as well. Hassium. You've probably never heard of hassium unless you're really into chemistry, but hassium is an artificial lab-produced element. It's a very nasty, highly radioactive substance, and it does not appear in nature. It's created in a lab, and once created, it lasts for a few seconds, and then it starts to deteriorate, and eventually it goes away. Has a very, very short half-life, we would say. Hassium. Is there anyone who would pay money to have some hassium? I would suggest that there is not, other than the possibility of some scientist who wants to recreate, an experiment that produced hassium in the first place. But for the average human being, hassium would not be considered a scarce resource because there is no use for it. No one uses hassium for anything. Therefore, it's not scarce, okay? So how do I know if something is scarce? Something is scarce if there, A, is a want or desire for it, and B, someone is willing to pay money for it, okay? If someone is willing to pay money for it, that tells you that they want it, and it is scarce, because if it wasn't scarce, they wouldn't pay money for it. They'd just get it for free, okay? So that's what scarcity is all about. All right, that leads us to the next topic, opportunity costs. Scarce resources can only be used in one way at a time. For example, if you're a farmer and you want to use your land to grow corn, you cannot use it to grow wheat at the same time. If you have $50 and you want to buy a sweater, if you use that $50 to buy the sweater, you cannot use the same $50 for a dinner at a restaurant. You can only use your scarce resource in one way. Every decision you make means choosing between alternatives. Do I want to use my $50 to buy a sweater, or do I want it to go out to dinner? Okay, you have to choose between alternatives. And the opportunity cost then is the highest valued alternative that you give up as a result of making that choice. So let's say that here in the Midwest, in the part of the Midwest that we live in, The land will get the greatest monetary return if we grow corn on it. It would get the second greatest return monetarily if we grow wheat on it. The opportunity cost then to use our land to grow corn is not the cost of the corn seeds, it's not the cost of the land. The opportunity cost is the wheat that I give up in order to grow corn. What does it cost me to grow corn? It costs me the wheat that I cannot grow. What does it cost you to go out to dinner at a restaurant? It costs me the ability to use that same money to buy a sweater. Okay? If the sweater was my second choice, the sweater would be my opportunity cost. I choose to go to dinner at a restaurant. How much did it cost me? Well, in economic terms, it did not cost you $50. It cost you the sweater. Okay? The opportunity cost is the true cost of your decision. So, opportunity cost is the highest valued alternative that you give up as a result of making a choice. Let's say that my two favorite candy bars are Reese's Peanut Butter Cups and a Baby Ruth bar. I have $1. I want a piece of candy. Okay, so if I choose to buy a Reese's Peanut Butter Cup, then the opportunity cost to me is the Baby Ruth bar. It's not that the candy cost me $1. The Reese's Peanut Butter Cup, the real cost was the Baby Ruth bar I gave up in order to get the Reese's. That's opportunity cost, not the money. It's what you would have used with that money had you not bought the item that you bought. So the economic way of thinking then is that scarcity forces us to make choices. All choices involve alternatives. When you make a choice, you have to give up one of those alternatives. And people choose according to their own perceived self-interest. If you used your $50 to go out to dinner, you perceive that to be in your self-interest more than using that $50 to buy a sweater. Okay? You were figuring that you had a better want met, a better want fulfilled by going out to dinner with that $50 than buying the sweater. And all choices are future-oriented. So let's think about me buying that Reese's Peanut Butter Cup. Why am I buying it? Am I buying it because I enjoyed it in the past? No. I'm buying the Reese's Peanut Butter Cup because I anticipate enjoying it in the very near future. Okay, now, my past experiences with Reese's inform me or educate me that I will likely enjoy it the next time I have one. But I'm buying it not because I enjoyed it in the past, but because I want to enjoy it in the near future. Choices are future-oriented. Okay, last point. Marginal benefits and marginal cost, or what we call marginal analysis. Our choices are all based on this marginal analysis. The marginal benefit is the additional benefit one receives from making a decision. And when we make a decision, there's also a marginal cost, the additional cost from making that decision. So I have a picture here of someone brushing her teeth. If you brush your teeth, let's say, with just 2 strokes of the toothbrush on your teeth, are you going to get much benefit from that? Probably not. You need to brush a little more than just 2 strokes. So what if I brush my teeth for 100 strokes? Am I getting with those additional strokes a whole lot of benefit? Let's go back. Let's say I'm going to brush my teeth with 10 strokes. Okay, I can get my teeth pretty clean if I do 10 strokes on each tooth. Okay, but if I can get them clean with 10 strokes, won't I get them even cleaner with 15? Well, eventually, yeah, but eventually the amount of additional cleanliness you get doesn't really come to much. And there is a marginal cost of that, and that cost is the additional time spent in brushing your teeth. So eventually you're going to say, there's no need to scrub my teeth anymore. The marginal benefit is minimal. The marginal cost gets too much for the additional benefit of brushing with more strokes. That's that marginal analysis. So opportunity cost and marginal analysis are related. Eventually the marginal benefit will decline, and because of that decline in the marginal benefit and the cost tends to go up, you'll allocate your resources to a different opportunity. If I keep eating Reese's Peanut Butter Cups with my $1, eventually that additional Reese's Peanut Butter Cup's going to make me feel kind of sick after I've eaten 4 or 5 of them. I will use my additional dollars for another opportunity, and the Reese's will go down and maybe become my opportunity cost, where originally it was my first choice. And with that, we're going to stop this presentation. Check Canvas. I believe you have an assignment there. Talk to you.